A small hand tugged at his tailored suit pants. Daniel Lee stopped walking. He looked down. 7-year-old twins stared up at him. Their faces were smudged with dirt. "Mister, please give us some money." Daniel's eyebrows furrowed. Children begging at the entrance of Central Park. His hand that was reaching for his phone froze. The youngest girl approached. A worn necklace swayed around her neck. Something about it felt familiar. "Please." A woman came running from behind. She was panting. She tried to embrace the children but stopped short. Her face turned pale. Daniel's heart dropped like a stone. 7-year-old memories flashed like lightning. Her laughter, their last kiss, an empty office. "Erin." The woman staggered backward. Her lips trembled violently. She quickly pulled the children into her arms. "Kids, let's go. Right now." Her voice cracked. Fear spread across her face. The twins resisted. The youngest kept staring at Daniel. The necklace glinted in the sunlight. Daniel's fists clenched. Something was seriously wrong. Erin turned and whispered, "Please don't follow us." At that moment, the youngest turned around and shouted, "Mommy, do you know that man?" Daniel's world shook. The youngest tugged at Daniel's pants again. "Mister, we're so hungry." It was a small voice, but it pierced Daniel's chest. The twins nodded. They clutched their stomachs. "We haven't eaten for 2 days." Erin rushed over and pulled the children to her. Her face reddened. Shame spread across her features. "You can't say things like that." Her voice trembled. It was desperate. Daniel pulled out his wallet. His hands moved automatically. His heart had been racing wildly since the moment he saw Erin. "Wait a moment." Erin reached out and stopped him. She grabbed his wrist. It was warm like 7 years ago. "We don't need it." But her voice was cold. Daniel looked into her eyes. They were the same brown eyes as before, but now they were filled with wariness. The youngest spoke again. "Mommy, that man looks nice." Erin's hand trembled. She let go of Daniel's wrist. In that moment, Daniel made a decision. He had to find out what had happened to this woman and these children. Erin tried to turn and leave with the children. Daniel began following them. Daniel pulled out his business card and threw it. The card flew in the wind and fell at Erin's feet. She looked down. Her breath stopped. "Daniel Lee, CEO, Lee Tech Group." Her lips trembled violently. That entry-level employee from 7 years ago had become a billionaire. The children picked up the business card. The twins stumbled over the letters. "What's a CEO?" Daniel knelt down. He met the children at eye level. Just like Erin used to do 7 years ago. "It means boss." The youngest's eyes widened. "Are you really rich?" Erin pulled the child to her. She crumpled the business card and threw it. Anger erupted. "Go away. Right now." Daniel stood up. He took off his suit jacket. He draped it over the youngest. The child was so small that the jacket dragged on the ground. Tears welled up in Erin's eyes. His old warmth came flooding back. "Why are you doing this?" Her voice cracked. Daniel looked at her. His expression was cold, but his eyes burned hot. "We need to talk about what happened 7 years ago." Erin stepped backward. Fear spread across her face. Daniel pulled out his phone. He began dialing someone. "Brian, it's me. Look into Erin's song." Erin knocked Daniel's phone out of his hand. The phone fell to the ground and the screen shattered. The children jumped back in surprise. "Don't you dare." Her voice was almost a scream. That night 7 years ago came flooding back. The moment she was kicked out of the company corridor, the memory of hiding her pregnancy and running away. Daniel picked up the broken phone. His hand was bleeding. Glass shards had embedded in it. "Erin, calm down." His calm voice was even more frightening. Erin grabbed the children's hands and dragged them. The twins stumbled. The youngest began to cry. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Erin ran without looking back. She went deep into Central Park. She disappeared among the trees. Daniel stood there looking at his bleeding hand. 7 years ago, she had disappeared just like this. Without any explanation. Passers-by murmured. A man in a suit was standing there bleeding. Daniel pulled out a handkerchief from his pocket. He wrapped the wound. His anger was greater than the pain. He put the broken phone in his pocket. "You can't run away this time," he muttered in a cold voice. He was determined to return to the company and use every resource to find her. Daniel kicked open his office door. The door slammed against the wall with a loud bang. His secretary jumped up in surprise. "Sir, your hand is bleeding." Daniel waved his hand to stop her. He slumped into his chair. He clutched his head. Memories from 7 years ago came flooding back. The last day Erin came to work, her empty desk, the traces of her disappearance without even a resignation letter. That's when Brian had said she quit for personal reasons. Daniel punched his desk. The pen holder toppled over. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" His voice echoed throughout the entire office. His secretary asked, trembling, "Sir, what happened?" Daniel rummaged through his drawers. He found files from 7 years ago. Erin's personnel record emerged. The reason for resignation field was blank. His hands trembled. Something had been hidden. He pressed the intercom. "Get Brian up here right now." His voice was cold as ice. Footsteps were heard in the corridor. Brian knocked on the door. Daniel threw Erin's file onto the desk. "Explain this. Right now." Brian's face turned white. He looked like he was afraid something would be discovered. Daniel slammed his fist onto the computer keyboard. The screen flickered as he scrolled through 7 years of employee records. His assistant had left hours ago, but the CEO's office blazed with light at midnight. Brian stood frozen by the door. Sweat dripped down his temples. "She just left," Brian stammered. "Personal reasons." Daniel's chair spun around violently. His eyes were bloodshot. Personal reasons don't erase someone from existence. He yanked open filing cabinets. Papers scattered across the marble floor. Erin's employment contract was missing. Her resignation letter was missing. Even her security badge records had been wiped clean. Brian's hands trembled as he reached for the door handle. "Sir, it's late. Maybe we should get out." The words came out like ice. Brian fled. Daniel stared at his computer screen. The cursor blinked on an empty search result. 7 years ago, Erin Song had vanished from their corporate database as if she had never existed. But those children's faces burned in his memory. The youngest girl's necklace had caught the light in a way that made his chest tighten. Something about that pendant was familiar. He grabbed his car keys. The black Bentley crawled through the narrow streets of Queens at dawn. Daniel had hired 3 private investigators overnight. They had tracked Erin to this neighborhood within hours. He parked across from a crumbling apartment building. Paint peeled from its walls like diseased skin. Broken windows were patched with cardboard. This was where she lived now. A fire escape zigzagged up the building's side. Daniel counted floors. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. The investigators had been thorough. Movement caught his eye. The twins emerged from the building's entrance. They carried a cardboard box between them. Inside were broken toys and empty bottles. Daniel's throat constricted. These children were collecting garbage to sell. The boys walked to the corner where a homeless man sat with his own collection of cans. They began negotiating. Their small voices carried across the street. "Mister, can we share your spot today?" The man nodded. The twins arranged their meager items beside his shopping cart. Daniel's knuckles went white as he gripped the steering wheel. 7 years ago, he had been climbing corporate ladders while Erin was pregnant and alone. Now her children were begging on street corners. The apartment building's front door opened again. Erin stepped out, carrying the youngest girl on her hip. Even from this distance, Daniel could see how thin she had become. Her clothes hung loose on her frame. She walked to the twins and knelt beside them. She was checking their collection, counting coins in her palm. Her shoulders sagged. The youngest girl slipped from her mother's arms and wandered toward Daniel's car. She pressed her face against the passenger window, leaving small handprints on the glass. Daniel's heart hammered. The child was staring directly at him through the tinted window. Could she see him? The girl's necklace swung forward as she leaned against the car. The pendant caught the morning light, and Daniel's breath stopped. It was a tiny silver horse. He had given Erin that exact necklace 7 years ago for her birthday. She had laughed and said it looked like the carousel horses in Central Park. "Chloe, come back here." Erin's voice cracked across the street. She was running toward the car, panic written across her face. The little girl turned and skipped back to her mother. But she looked over her shoulder at Daniel's car one more time. Daniel's hands shook as he started the engine. That necklace was proof. This child was connected to him somehow. He followed them at a distance as they walked through the neighborhood. Erin held both twins' hands while Chloe walked beside them. They stopped at a small grocery store. Through the window, Daniel watched Erin count crumpled dollar bills at the counter. She was buying a single loaf of bread and a carton of milk. The cashier looked impatient as she searched her pockets for exact change. The twins pressed their faces against the candy display. Their breath fogged the glass as they pointed at colorful packages they couldn't afford. Chloe stood apart from her brothers. She wasn't looking at the candy. Instead, she stared out the window, directly at Daniel's car again. This child had an uncanny ability to sense his presence. Erin gathered her small purchase and herded the children toward the exit. As they passed Daniel's car, Chloe suddenly broke away from her mother and ran to his window. She placed both tiny hands against the glass and mouthed a single word, "Daddy." Daniel's world tilted. His vision blurred. This 5-year-old child somehow knew who he was. Erin screamed and grabbed Chloe, pulling her away from the car. She looked directly at Daniel through the windshield, and their eyes met for the first time since Central Park. Her face was a mask of terror and rage. She mouthed her own words, "Stay away from us." Then she ran, dragging all 3 children behind her. Daniel sat paralyzed in his car. His chest felt like it was caving in. That little girl had called him Daddy. And somehow, impossibly, it felt right. He pulled out his phone and dialed his head of security. "I need everything you can find on Erin's song. Medical records, financial history, employment after she left our company. Everything." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled as he ended the call. The silver horse necklace haunted his thoughts. He had bought it at a small jewelry store near their office. Erin had worn it every day until she disappeared. Now her daughter wore it. A daughter who looked to be about 5 years old. Daniel's math was simple and devastating. If Chloe was 5, she had been born 2 years after Erin left the company. But those eyes, that instinctive recognition, she was his child. He was certain of it. The question that burned in his chest wasn't whether Chloe was his daughter. The question was why Erin had hidden her from him for 5 years. And why that little girl seemed to know exactly who he was, even though they had never met before today. Daniel drove back to his penthouse as the sun climbed higher over the city. But he couldn't shake the image of Chloe's small hands pressed against his car window, or the way she had mouthed that single earth-shattering word. "Daddy." Daniel's laptop screen shattered under his fist. Glass fragments embedded in his knuckles as he stared at the corrupted email server. 7 years of deleted correspondence with Erin had been permanently wiped from the company database. His IT director stood frozen in the doorway, clutching a stack of backup drives. "Sir, the email restoration failed. Someone used military-grade deletion software." Daniel's bleeding hand left crimson smears on his white desk. The pain felt distant compared to the rage building in his chest. Someone had deliberately erased every trace of Erin from his company's history. His phone buzzed. A text from his private investigator, target spotted at Queens General Hospital. Emergency room. Daniel grabbed his car keys and ran. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Daniel pushed through the emergency room doors. The antiseptic smell hit him like a wall. He scanned the crowded waiting area until he spotted them. Erin sat hunched over in a plastic chair, cradling Chloe against her chest. The little girl's face was flushed with fever, her breathing shallow and rapid. The twins flanked their mother, their small hands patting Chloe's back. A nurse called out patient names from behind the reception desk. Erin's head snapped up each time, hope flickering in her eyes before dying when it wasn't their turn. Daniel approached slowly. His footsteps echoed on the linoleum floor. Erin looked up and her face went white. She clutched Chloe tighter, as if Daniel might snatch the child away. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried 7 years of pain. Daniel knelt in front of them. Up close, he could see the dark circles under Erin's eyes, the way her hands trembled as she held her daughter. "She needs help," he said simply. The black Bentley crawled through the narrow streets of Queens at dawn. Daniel had hired 3 private investigators overnight. They had tracked Erin to this neighborhood within hours. He parked across from a crumbling apartment building. Paint peeled from its walls like diseased skin. Broken windows were patched with cardboard. This was where she lived now. A fire escape zigzagged up the building's side. Daniel counted floors. 3rd floor, apartment 3B. The investigators had been thorough. Movement caught his eye. The twins emerged from the building's entrance. They carried a cardboard box between them. Inside were broken toys and empty bottles. Daniel's throat constricted. These children were collecting garbage to sell. The boys walked to the corner where a homeless man sat with his own collection of cans. They began negotiating. Their small voices carried across the street. "Mister, can we share your spot today?" The man nodded. The twins arranged their meager items beside his shopping cart. Daniel's knuckles went white as he gripped the steering wheel. 7 years ago, he had been climbing corporate ladders while Erin was pregnant and alone. Now her children were begging on street corners. The apartment building's front door opened again. Erin stepped out, carrying the youngest girl on her hip. Even from this distance, Daniel could see how thin she had become. Her clothes hung loose on her frame. She walked to the twins and knelt beside them. She was checking their collection, counting coins in her palm. Her shoulders sagged. The youngest girl slipped from her mother's arms and wandered toward Daniel's car. She pressed her face against the passenger window, leaving small handprints on the glass. Daniel's heart hammered. The child was staring directly at him through the tinted window. Could she see him? The girl's necklace swung forward as she leaned against the car. The pendant caught the morning light, and Daniel's breath stopped. It was a tiny silver horse. He had given Erin that exact necklace 7 years ago for her birthday. She had laughed and said it looked like the carousel horses in Central Park. "Chloe, come back here." Erin's voice cracked across the street. She was running toward the car, panic written across her face. The little girl turned and skipped back to her mother. But she looked over her shoulder at Daniel's car one more time. Daniel's hands shook as he started the engine. That necklace was proof. This child was connected to him somehow. He followed them at a distance as they walked through the neighborhood. Erin held both twins' hands while Chloe walked beside them. They stopped at a small grocery store. Through the window, Daniel watched Erin count crumpled dollar bills at the counter. She was buying a single loaf of bread and a carton of milk. The cashier looked impatient as she searched her pockets for exact change. The twins pressed their faces against the candy display. Their breath fogged the glass as they pointed at colorful packages they couldn't afford. Chloe stood apart from her brothers. She wasn't looking at the candy. Instead, she stared out the window, directly at Daniel's car again. This child had an uncanny ability to sense his presence. Erin gathered her small purchase and herded the children toward the exit. As they passed Daniel's car, Chloe suddenly broke away from her mother and ran to his window. She placed both tiny hands against the glass and mouthed a single word, "Daddy!" Daniel's world tilted. His vision blurred. This 5-year-old child somehow knew who he was. Erin screamed and grabbed Chloe, pulling her away from the car. She looked directly at Daniel through the windshield, and their eyes met for the first time since Central Park. Her face was a mask of terror and rage. She mouthed her own words, "Stay away from us." Then she ran, dragging all 3 children behind her. Daniel sat paralyzed in his car. His chest felt like it was caving in. That little girl had called him Daddy. And somehow, impossibly, it felt right. He pulled out his phone and dialed his head of security. "I need everything you can find on Erin's song. Medical records, financial history, employment after she left our company. Everything." His voice was steady, but his hands trembled as he ended the call. The silver horse necklace haunted his thoughts. He had bought it at a small jewelry store near their office. Erin had worn it every day until she disappeared. Now her daughter wore it. A daughter who looked to be about 5 years old. Daniel's math was simple and devastating. If Chloe was 5, she had been born 2 years after Erin left the company. But those eyes, that instinctive recognition, she was his child. He was certain of it. The question that burned in his chest wasn't whether Chloe was his daughter. The question was why Erin had hidden her from him for 5 years. And why that little girl seemed to know exactly who he was, even though they had never met before today. Daniel drove back to his penthouse as the sun climbed higher over the city. But he couldn't shake the image of Chloe's small hands pressed against his car window, or the way she had mouthed that single earth-shattering word. Daddy. Daniel's laptop screen shattered under his fist. Glass fragments embedded in his knuckles as he stared at the corrupted email server. 7 years of deleted correspondence with Erin had been permanently wiped from the company database. His IT director stood frozen in the doorway, clutching a stack of backup drives. "Sir, the email restoration failed. Someone used military-grade deletion software." Daniel's bleeding hand left crimson smears on his white desk. The pain felt distant compared to the rage building in his chest. Someone had deliberately erased every trace of Erin from his company's history. His phone buzzed. A text from his private investigator, target spotted at Queen's General Hospital. Emergency room. Daniel grabbed his car keys and ran. The hospital's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Daniel pushed through the emergency room doors. The antiseptic smell hit him like a wall. He scanned the crowded waiting area until he spotted them. Erin sat hunched over in a plastic chair, cradling Chloe against her chest. The little girl's face was flushed with fever, her breathing shallow and rapid. The twins flanked their mother, their small hands patting Chloe's back. A nurse called out patient names from behind the reception desk. Erin's head snapped up each time, hope flickering in her eyes before dying when it wasn't their turn. Daniel approached slowly. His footsteps echoed on the linoleum floor. Erin looked up and her face went white. She clutched Chloe tighter, as if Daniel might snatch the child away. "What are you doing here?" Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried 7 years of pain. Daniel knelt in front of them. Up close, he could see the dark circles under Erin's eyes, the way her hands trembled as she held her daughter. "She needs help," he said simply. Before Erin could protest, Daniel stood and walked to the reception desk. He pulled out his black credit card and placed it on the counter. "I need the best pediatrician you have. Right now." The receptionist's eyes widened at the name on the card. Within minutes, a team of doctors surrounded Chloe. They whisked her away on a gurney, Erin running alongside. Daniel watched through the treatment room window as doctors worked on the little girl. For lines snaked into her tiny arms. Oxygen tubes fed into her nose. Her eyes fluttered open and she looked directly at him through the glass. Even sick and scared, she mouthed that word again. "Daddy." Daniel's legs nearly buckled. 2 hours later, Chloe was stable. The doctors diagnosed severe dehydration and malnutrition. She would need to stay overnight for observation. Erin sat beside the hospital bed, stroking her daughter's hair. The twins had fallen asleep in chairs nearby. Daniel stood in the doorway, afraid to come closer. "You can't just show up and fix everything with money," Erin said without looking at him. Her voice was hollow, defeated. "These are my children. My responsibility." Daniel stepped into the room. The monitors beeped steadily, marking Chloe's heartbeat. "Are they?" he asked quietly. Erin's hand stilled on Chloe's forehead. Her shoulders tensed. "All of them." The question hung in the air like smoke. Erin finally turned to face him, and Daniel saw tears streaming down her cheeks. "You left me," she whispered. "You chose your career over us." Daniel's mind reeled. She had said us. "I never left you. You disappeared. One day you were there, the next. Brian told me you were being promoted, that I was a distraction, that I needed to sign the non-disclosure agreement and disappear if I wanted you to succeed." Daniel's blood turned to ice. Brian, his trusted assistant, his right-hand man for 7 years. What agreement? Erin laughed bitterly. "You don't even know, do you? The agreement that paid me to stay silent about our relationship, about the pregnancy, about everything." Daniel's vision blurred. His hands clenched into fists. "Show me." Erin reached into her worn purse and pulled out a folded document. The paper was yellowed with age, creased from years of handling. Daniel's hands shook as he unfolded it. The letterhead was from his own company. The signature at the bottom was Brian's, acting with full authority from CEO Daniel Lee. The document paid Erin Song $50,000 to terminate her employment immediately and agreed to never contact Daniel Lee or any company employees again. The reason for termination was listed as breach of professional conduct. Daniel's world tilted. He had never seen this document. He had never authorized this payment. He had never wanted Erin to leave. "You thought I signed this?" Erin nodded, fresh tears falling. "Brian said you were too busy with the merger to handle it personally. That you wanted me gone before the investors found out about our relationship." Daniel crumpled the paper in his fist. 7 years of lies. 7 years of believing Erin had abandoned him. 7 years of missing his daughter's life. His daughter. He looked at Chloe sleeping in the hospital bed. Her dark hair, her stubborn chin, the way she clutched her blanket. She looked exactly like his baby pictures. "She's mine, isn't she?" Erin closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were filled with exhaustion. "I found out I was pregnant 2 days after I signed that agreement. I was already gone. You had already made it clear you didn't want me in your life." Daniel's chest felt like it was caving in. He had missed everything. Her pregnancy. Chloe's birth. Her first steps, first words, first everything. The twins. "My ex-boyfriend Marcus. We dated after I left your company. He left when he found out about Chloe." Daniel processed this information. 2 of the children weren't his, but he had watched them beg on street corners. He had seen them count coins for bread. "I want to help. All of you." Erin shook her head violently. "We don't need your help. We've survived this long without you." But her voice cracked on the words. Daniel could see the exhaustion in every line of her face, the way her clothes hung loose from too many skipped meals. "I want a paternity test." The words came out harsher than he intended. Erin flinched as if he had slapped her. "Get out." Her voice was deadly quiet. "Get out right now." The twins stirred in their chairs. Lucas opened his eyes and looked between his mother and Daniel. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Erin's face crumpled. She pulled both boys into her arms, trying to shield them from the tension crackling in the room. "Nothing, baby. Everything's fine." But nothing was fine. Daniel could see it in the way Liam's ribs showed through his thin shirt, in the way Lucas's shoes were held together with tape, in the way Chloe's fever had spiked because they couldn't afford regular medical care. Daniel left the hospital room, but he didn't leave the building. He paced the hallway outside, his mind racing. His phone rang. Brian's name flashed on the screen. "Sir, I heard you were at the hospital. Is everything all right?" Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. Brian's voice sounded concerned, caring. The same voice that had lied to him for 7 years. "Come to Queen's General. Now." He hung up without waiting for a response. 30 minutes later, Brian hurried through the hospital doors. His face was flushed from running, his usually perfect hair disheveled. "Daniel, what happened? Are you hurt?" Daniel pulled out the crumpled non-disclosure agreement. He smoothed it against the wall and held it up. "Explain this." Brian's face went ashen. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I can explain. You stole 7 years of my life." Daniel's voice was eerily calm. Brian took a step backward. "You made me believe she left me. You made her believe I didn't want her. You kept my daughter from me." Brian's hands trembled as he reached for the document. The merger was falling apart. The investors were spooked by the office romance rumors. "I was protecting the company. Protecting you." Daniel's fist connected with Brian's jaw before the man could finish speaking. Brian crashed into the hospital wall, blood streaming from his nose. "You're fired." Daniel's voice echoed through the hospital corridor. Nurses and patients turned to stare. "Security will escort you out of the building tomorrow. If you ever contact me or my family again, I'll destroy you." Brian struggled to his feet, holding his broken nose. "Your family?" "Daniel, you don't understand. She's been living in poverty for years. What kind of mother lets her children?" Daniel grabbed Brian by the throat and slammed him against the wall. "Finish that sentence. I dare you." Brian's eyes bulged. He clawed at Daniel's hands. "Security." A hospital guard appeared, but Daniel released Brian before the man could intervene. "He's leaving," Daniel said calmly. Brian stumbled toward the exit, blood dripping onto his expensive suit. Daniel returned to Chloe's room. Through the window, he watched Erin singing softly to her daughter. The twins had curled up on either side of the hospital bed, creating a protective circle around their little sister. This was his family, his daughter, and he had lost 7 years with them because of one man's lies. But he wouldn't lose another day. Daniel pulled out his phone and called his lawyer. "I need you to draw up custody papers and adoption papers for 2 boys. And I need you to do it tonight." He paused, watching Chloe's small chest rise and fall with each breath. "Also, I want you to buy the building where they're living. I want every family in that building to have their rent forgiven. And I want the building renovated, top to bottom." His lawyer's voice was puzzled. "Sir, that's going to cost." "I don't care what it costs." Daniel ended the call and pressed his forehead against the cool hospital window. Inside the room, Chloe opened her eyes. She looked directly at him and smiled. A real smile, not the scared expression she'd worn before. She pressed her tiny hand against the window glass, matching it to his much larger hand on the other side. For the first time in 7 years, Daniel felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. But Erin still wouldn't look at him. And he knew that winning back his daughter's love would be easier than earning Erin's forgiveness. The war for his family was just beginning. Daniel's penthouse apartment transformed overnight. Interior designers worked through the dawn hours, converting his sterile bachelor pad into something resembling a home. Child-safe furniture appeared. Toys filled empty corners. A kitchen that had never been used suddenly overflowed with breakfast foods and children's vitamins. He stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the sun rise over Manhattan. His reflection stared back, a billionaire who had everything except the only things that mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from the hospital. Chloe discharged. Family left at 6 a.m. Daniel's jaw tightened. Erin was running again. The Queen's apartment building looked different in daylight. Daniel's construction crews had already begun work on the exterior. New windows gleamed where cardboard patches used to be. Fresh paint covered years of neglect. But apartment 3B was empty. Daniel climbed the fire escape to the 3rd floor. The window was unlocked, a security risk that made his chest tighten with worry. He pushed it open and stepped inside. The apartment was smaller than his walk-in closet. A single mattress lay on the floor, surrounded by the twins' drawings taped to the walls. Stick figures of a family with no father. A kitchen consisted of a hot plate and a mini-fridge that hummed with mechanical distress. On a milk crate that served as a nightstand, Daniel found a photograph. It was from 7 years ago, him and Erin at the company Christmas party. They were laughing at something off camera, his arm around her waist, her hand resting on his chest. She had kept it all these years. Beneath the photo was a small notebook. Daniel opened it and found page after page of Erin's handwriting. A diary of sorts, chronicling her pregnancy alone. Week 12. Morning sickness is getting worse. I can barely keep food down, but I have to eat for the baby. Daniel's baby. Week 20. It's a girl. I wanted to call him and tell him, but Brian's words keep echoing in my head. He doesn't want us. Week 30. I dream about Daniel every night. I imagine him feeling her kick. I imagine him choosing names with me. But when I wake up, I'm still alone. Week 40. Chloe Rose Leesong. Born 3:47 a.m. 6 pounds, 2 ounces. She has his eyes. I whispered his name to her, even though he'll never know she exists. Daniel's hands shook as he read entry after entry. Years of birthdays he'd missed. First words he'd never heard. Nights when Erin worked 3 jobs to keep them fed while he lived in luxury blocks away. The final entry was dated just 1 week ago. Chloe asked about her daddy again today. I don't know how much longer I can keep lying to her. She's starting to look just like him. Sometimes I catch her staring out the window like she's waiting for someone. Maybe she can sense he's out there somewhere. Daniel closed the notebook and pressed it against his chest. The weight of 7 lost years crushed down on him. A sound from the fire escape made him turn. Footsteps on metal rungs. Erin appeared at the window, her face a mask of fury. Get out of my home. She climbed through the window, blocking his exit. Where are the children? Safe. Away from you. Daniel held up the notebook. You wrote about me. For 7 years, you wrote about me. Erin's composure cracked. She lunged for the notebook, but Daniel held it out of reach. You kept our photo. You gave her my last name. Give it back. Erin's voice broke on the words. Tears streamed down her face. You had no right to read that. Those were my private thoughts. My pain. Daniel's heart shattered at the raw anguish in her voice. I never knew, Erin. I swear on my life, I never knew about any of it. Brian forged those documents. He stole you from me. Stop lying. Erin collapsed onto the bare mattress, sobbing. You chose your company over me. You chose money over love. You chose success over your own child. Daniel knelt beside her on the floor. He wanted to touch her, to comfort her, but she flinched away from his proximity. I looked for you. After you disappeared, I hired investigators. I called every hospital, every women's shelter. I thought you had died. Erin's sobs quieted to hiccups. Brian told me you were relieved I was gone, that I was holding you back from your potential. Brian lied about everything. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed her the screen. A news article from that morning. Former executive assistant arrested for corporate fraud and embezzlement. He's been stealing from the company for years. Using forged documents with my signature. The FBI raided his house this morning. Erin stared at the phone screen, her face pale. He's in jail. He'll never hurt us again. The word us hung between them like a bridge neither dared to cross. There is no us, Erin whispered. There hasn't been for 7 years. There could be. Daniel's voice was barely audible. I want to know my daughter. I want to help raise the twins. I want to be the family we should have been. Erin stood up abruptly, pacing the tiny apartment. You can't just waltz back into our lives and expect everything to be perfect. Chloe doesn't even know you're her father. The boys think their dad abandoned them. We're strangers to each other now. Then let's stop being strangers. Daniel rose to his feet, matching her movements. Let me take you all to dinner. Somewhere nice. Let me show Chloe that not all men leave. Erin stopped pacing. Her back was to him, but he could see her shoulders trembling. She asks about you every day. The admission was so quiet he almost missed it. She says she dreams about a man in a fancy car who watches her from far away. She says he has kind eyes like hers. Daniel's throat constricted. What do you tell her? I tell her that her daddy loves her very much, but he lives far away and can't visit. I don't want to live far away anymore. Erin turned around. Her eyes were red from crying, but something had shifted in her expression. One dinner. That's all. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs. One dinner. But if you hurt her, if you make promises you can't keep, if you decide this is too complicated and disappear again, I will make sure you never see any of us again. The threat carried the weight of a mother's fierce protection. I understand. Erin wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. There's a diner on Queens Boulevard. Nothing fancy. We'll meet you there at 6. She was testing him, seeing if the billionaire CEO would lower himself to a neighborhood diner. I'll be there at 5:30. Erin nodded and moved toward the window. Erin. She paused without turning around. I never stopped loving you. Her shoulders stiffened. For a moment, Daniel thought she might respond. Instead, she climbed out the window and disappeared down the fire escape. Daniel stood alone in the empty apartment, surrounded by the ghosts of the family he'd never known he had. But tonight, for the first time in 7 years, he would sit across a dinner table from his daughter. The thought terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. At 5:15, Daniel sat in a corner booth at Murphy's Diner, his hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He had changed clothes 3 times, settling on jeans and a simple button-down shirt. He didn't want to intimidate the children with his usual expensive suits. The bell above the door chimed. Daniel's head snapped up. Erin entered first, scanning the restaurant nervously. The twins flanked her, their hair freshly combed and their clothes clean but obviously second-hand. Chloe held Erin's hand, wearing a yellow dress that was too big for her small frame. When Chloe spotted Daniel, she broke away from her mother and ran to his booth. You came. Her voice was pure joy. She climbed onto the bench beside him before Erin could stop her. Of course I came. Daniel's voice was thick with emotion. Up close, he could see so much of himself in her features. The stubborn set of her jaw. The way her left eyebrow quirked when she was curious. The twins approached more cautiously. Lucas slid into the booth across from Daniel while Liam remained standing beside Erin. Are you really a billionaire? Lucas asked bluntly. Lucas. Erin hissed, but Daniel smiled. I have a lot of money, yes. But that's not the most important thing about me. What is? Chloe asked, leaning against Daniel's arm with startling trust. Daniel looked at Erin, then back at his daughter. The most important thing is that I want to be your friend. Chloe beamed. The twins exchanged glances. Our mom says you knew her a long time ago, Liam said, finally sitting down. I did. Your mom was the smartest, kindest person I'd ever met. Erin's cheeks flushed pink. She studied the menu intently, avoiding Daniel's gaze. The waitress approached, and Daniel ordered enough food for a small army. Pancakes, burgers, milkshakes, apple pie. When was the last time these children had eaten their fill? As they waited for the food, Chloe chattered about everything and nothing. Her favorite color, purple. Her favorite animal, horses, like her necklace. Her dreams of learning to read chapter books. I already know some words, she announced proudly. Mommy teaches me. Your mommy is a very good teacher. Daniel caught Erin's eye across the table. She looked away quickly, but not before he saw the tears threatening to spill. The food arrived, and Daniel watched in amazement as the children devoured everything in front of them. When had he last felt such simple pleasure at providing a meal? Mr. Daniel? Chloe's voice was small. Yes. Why don't I have a daddy like other kids? The diner fell silent around their table. Erin's face went white. The twins stopped eating. Daniel's heart hammered as he looked at this beautiful little girl who carried his DNA, his eyes, his stubborn chin. You do have a daddy, sweetheart. He didn't know about you for a long time. Chloe's eyes widened. He didn't know about me? No. But now he does. And he thinks you're the most wonderful little girl in the whole world. Chloe's smile could have powered the entire city. Where is he now? Daniel glanced at Erin, who was crying silently into her napkin. He's closer than you think. As they finished dinner, Daniel felt something he hadn't experienced in 7 years. Complete contentment. This was what he'd been missing. Not another business deal or corporate acquisition. Family dinners and silly conversations, and a little girl who fell asleep against his shoulder while her brothers argued over the last piece of pie. When it was time to leave, Chloe hugged Daniel goodbye. Will I see you again soon? Very soon. As they walked toward the exit, Daniel heard Chloe whisper to her mother, Mommy, I think my daddy might be magic. Erin's response was too quiet to hear, but Daniel saw her wipe fresh tears from her eyes. Standing in the diner parking lot, watching his family walk away into the night, Daniel made a silent promise. He would spend the rest of his life making up for the 7 years he'd lost. Starting tomorrow. Daniel's fist shattered the boardroom window. Glass rained down 40 floors onto the Manhattan street below as his executives cowered around the conference table. 7 years. His voice echoed off the marble walls. Blood dripped from his knuckles onto the polished table surface. 7 years of lies, and not one of you questioned it. The head of HR trembled as she pulled up Brian's employment records on her laptop. Daniel's security team had already escorted the disgraced assistant from the building in handcuffs, but the damage was irreversible. Daniel grabbed the nearest chair and hurled it across the room. It crashed into the wall, leaving a dent in the expensive paneling. His board members flinched with each impact. Sir, we had no idea Brian was forging documents, the CFO stammered. Daniel's laugh was bitter and sharp. My daughter has been living in poverty while you all collected your bonuses. My daughter. The word hung in the air like a grenade. None of his executives had known about Chloe's existence until this moment. Daniel stormed out of the boardroom, leaving behind a wake of shattered glass and terrified faces. His assistant, Brian's replacement, scrambled to keep up with his long strides. Cancel everything for the next month, Daniel barked without slowing down. And liquidate $50 million from my personal accounts. Sir, what should I tell the investors about? Tell them I'm investing in something more important than money. Daniel's penthouse felt like a mausoleum when he returned home that evening. Expensive art lined the walls, but there were no family photos. No children's drawings stuck to the refrigerator. No toys scattered across the floor. He had built an empire, but he had no one to share it with. His phone buzzed. A text from Erin, we need to talk. Tonight. Daniel's pulse quickened. He texted back immediately, where? Central Park. Where we first met again. The same bench where he had seen them begging just days ago now held only Erin. She sat hunched forward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The children were nowhere in sight. Daniel approached slowly, afraid she might bolt like a startled deer. Where are they? Safe. With a neighbor. Erin didn't look up as he sat beside her on the bench. The distance between them felt like an ocean. I read your diary, Daniel said quietly. Erin's shoulders stiffened. You had no right. You're right. I didn't. But I'm glad I did. Daniel pulled out a small velvet box and placed it on the bench between them. Erin's eyes widened. This isn't what you think, he said quickly. Open it. With trembling fingers, Erin lifted the lid. Inside wasn't a ring, but a tiny key. It's to a safety deposit box. Everything's in there. The real documents Brian forged. The money he embezzled. The emails he deleted. Proof of everything he did to us. Erin picked up the key, turning it over in her palm. Why are you showing me this? Because I need you to know the truth. All of it. Daniel's voice cracked. I never wanted you to leave. I looked for you every day for months. I hired investigators. I called hospitals. I thought you were dead. Tears streamed down Erin's face, but she still wouldn't look at him. When I found out I was pregnant, I wanted to tell you so badly. But Brian said you were already planning to fire me. That the pregnancy would ruin your reputation. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. He stole 7 years from us. 7 years I'll never get back. And what about the next 7 years? Erin whispered. What happens when you get bored of playing house? When the novelty wears off? Daniel slid off the bench and knelt in front of her, forcing her to meet his eyes. I want to marry you. The words tumbled out before he could stop them. Erin gasped. I want to adopt Lucas and Liam. I want Chloe to have my name legally. I want us to be a real family. Erin shook her head violently. You can't just fix 7 years of abandonment with a proposal. Then let me try for the next 70 years. Daniel's voice was raw with desperation. Let me prove that I never stopped loving you. That I never stopped wanting this. Erin stood abruptly, pacing away from the bench. The children barely know you. Chloe thinks you're some magical stranger who buys her dinner. The twins don't understand why their mother cries every time she looks at you. Then help me change that. Daniel rose and followed her, maintaining a careful distance. Give me a chance to be the father they deserve. The husband you deserved 7 years ago. Erin whirled around, her eyes blazing. And what if you decide it's too hard? What if board meetings become more important than bedtime stories? What if? Then you can take everything. Daniel's voice was steady and sure. The penthouse. The company. Every penny I have. I'll put it all in writing. Erin stared at him in shock. You're serious. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. The silence stretched between them like a tightrope. Daniel's heart hammered against his ribs as he waited for her answer. Finally, Erin reached into her purse and pulled out something small and silver. The horse necklace from Chloe's neck. She asked me to give this back to you. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. She said her daddy gave it to her mommy a long time ago, and now she wants her daddy to have it back so he won't forget about them. Daniel's vision blurred as he took the necklace. His fingers traced the tiny horse pendant he had bought in that little jewelry shop 7 years ago. There's something else. Erin's voice was barely a whisper. Inside the pendant. I never told you. Daniel's hands shook as he found the tiny clasp. The pendant opened like a locket, revealing a microscopic compartment inside. A folded piece of paper, no bigger than a postage stamp, fell into his palm. Daniel unfolded it carefully. In Erin's handwriting, faded but still legible, were 4 words. I love you forever. She had written it 7 years ago and hidden it in the necklace he gave her. She had carried his love around her neck through pregnancy, poverty, and pain. Daniel's composure shattered. He collapsed onto the bench, sobbing like a broken man. I love you too, he choked out. I never stopped. Not for a single day. Erin sat beside him and, for the first time in 7 years, she didn't pull away when he reached for her hand. One condition, she whispered. Daniel looked up, hope flickering in his chest. You don't get to be their father just because you want to be. You have to earn it. Every single day. Daniel nodded, tears streaming down his face. Every single day. Erin squeezed his hand. And if you ever hurt them, I won't. If you ever choose anything over them, I won't. If you ever make them feel abandoned again, I won't. Erin studied his face for a long moment, searching for any trace of deception. Okay. The word was barely audible, but it changed everything. Okay. Okay. Daniel pulled her into his arms, and for the first time in 7 years, Erin didn't resist. She melted against his chest, her tears soaking through his shirt. We have a lot of work to do, she murmured against his shoulder. I know. The children will need time to adjust. I know. And I need time to trust you again. Daniel pulled back to look at her face. Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere. As they sat together on that park bench where their story had begun again, Daniel made a silent promise. He would spend every remaining day of his life proving that some love stories were worth waiting for, even if it took 7 years to find their way back to each other. The next morning, Daniel's penthouse filled with the sound of children's laughter for the first time. Lucas and Liam raced through the rooms, marveling at the space and the view of the city below. Chloe sat curled in Daniel's lap, wearing her horse necklace again, listening as he read her favorite story. Aaron stood in the kitchen, making breakfast in a space larger than their entire apartment had been. It wasn't perfect. The twins still called him Mr. Daniel. Chloe still asked when they were going home. Aaron still flinched sometimes when he moved too quickly. But it was a beginning. And for the first time in 7 years, Daniel Lee had everything that mattered. His family was finally home.